This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, good evening, everyone. Hope everybody can hear me. That's got to hear me in the TV world, but I will now open the Southampton Planning Board meeting for August 30th, 2023. I have and welcome all those visiting us, channel 191 on the Spectrum. I have a full board this evening: Dan LaValle, Stephen Johnson, Mark Darnold, Paul Fergal, myself, Paul Diamond, and our board consultant, Richard Harris. And our first order of business this evening is a continuation of a public hearing for Berkshire Area for Retarded Children for a common driveway and a stormwater permit at 120 East Street, map 29, lot 55 and 55B. I received a continuance letter from R. Levesque and Associates that is representing Berkshire ARC, dated August 9th. And I would like to read into the record the public hearing notice that was published in the Daily Hampshire Gazette on July 25th and August 1st, which was also mailed to the abutters prior to July 25th. And I will read it, and it says, "Notice is hereby given in accordance with the provision of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, that the Southampton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, August 9th, 2023, 7 p.m. at Town Hall, 210 College Highway. The board will consider a request from Berkshire County ARC, Inc. for a common driveway and stormwater permit at 120 East Street, map 29, lot 55 and 55B. A copy of the application may be reviewed at Town Hall, Clerk's Office, or by email to the Southampton Planning Board at gmail.com. Paul Diamond, Chair, Southampton Planning Board." And as I mentioned, the subsequent continuance, because of a lack of a quorum we had for the August 9th meeting, has brought us to this evening. And representing the applicant is Rob Levesque from Levesque Associates in Westfield, Massachusetts. And at this time, I would ask, we're going to take this in two segments, Rob. We'll do the common driveway first.
Great.
And then we'll do the stormwater after that. So please proceed.
Thank you. For the record, Rob Levesque from our Levesque Associates, here this evening representing Berkshire ARC. Mr. Damon and planning board members, if it pleases the board, what I'll do is make a brief presentation regarding the common drive, and then be happy to answer any questions you have. Fair enough?
Good enough.
Great. So this is for Berkshire ARC. They provide housing for folks with certain needs. The subject property is part of a parent parcel that was divided up by Heritage Surveys. The property has frontage on East Street, and there was 3 parcels created. They went through the, I believe you're probably familiar with it, went through the A&R process. At that time, I believe they contemplated a common drive. We have, because of where the site sits, directly across the street, there's a perennial stream. So that perennial stream has a 200-foot riverfront area associated with it. So it's logical that Heritage had decided to have a common drive, which is allowable under the bylaw. That common drive brings us through the riverfront area with the least amount of riverfront area disturbance possible. So as part of our application process, not only with the planning board, but with the Conservation Commission, we've also filed concurrently for a notice of intent for the disturbance within the riverfront area, and which would consist of the driveway and associated stormwater. We have had public hearings with the Conservation Commission. They have continued the hearing based on waiting for the outcome of tonight or a subsequent hearing from the planning board before they make their final decision. But I believe, without putting any words in the commission's mouth, that we're in good stead with regard to them issuing an order of conditions. So what you have before you is the common drive. I believe the common drive meets the standards for submission, design standards. I believe we've gone through the checklist items. We've received a very thorough review from your planner and I believe the chair with regard to how we meet the sections of the zoning bylaw as it relates to the common drive. I'd be happy to go through in detail. I do believe there's a couple outstanding items based on a brief conversation I had. I think one of the items that was outstanding was a question about site distance as it relates to the curb cut. The good news is, and we're the traffic engineers in the room, the good news is that East Street obviously curves the opposite way away from the site. So the site distance we could certainly confirm, but I believe that's one quote unquote hanging chad that remains. We'd be happy to address that through a condition. So I believe we've addressed all of the questions and comments. I believe one of the big comments was that we were not showing the driveway accessing an additional property. So from a conceptual standpoint, we've shown a single family home, let's call that to the west. So
Could you maybe go to the map on that, Rob?
yeah.
For for the public's, for those folks there, maybe just turn that a bit so the public here that would like
But Paul, I've listened to recordings. If you could get closer to your mic, that would help.
So I'll try to be a little bit louder. This is the proposed curb cut. The common drive falls within the middle lot, which has a large area to the south. That said, initially this common drive was shown, but we didn't show a driveway going to the adjacent property. This property is being developed separately, so Berkshire Arc is responsible for constructing the driveway, the stormwater associated with the driveway in their single-family home. This property, I don't believe, has been conveyed by the original owner yet. It may have by now, I'm not sure. And then, the property in the rear actually was conveyed, but right now there's no, that we're aware of, at the time of taking the project, there was no immediate construction proposed on that lot. So we're basically focusing on what we're doing here, but we're showing that there will be at least this lot, I'm assuming, would be developed at some point. The lot to the south, again, we would expect that they would have to go through, they might have to go through the Conservation Commission because of the proximity to the bordering vegetated wetland, as well as showing the extension of the driveway, which is arguably no longer common after this point. So we have an agreement that's been proposed, a draft agreement, I believe, for the maintenance of the roadway. Talking to the planner, made it clear that we don't want this responsibility for maintenance to fall back on the town in any way, shape, or form, so we understand that. So whatever conditions can help control that or prevent that in the future, we completely understand and would agree with. But that said, I believe we meet most, if not all, the standards, and I would be happy to answer any specific questions you have related to your matrix that we put together.
All right, let me start with Richard on this.
Just looking at the revised plans, there's a couple of minor, I think, technical details that can be addressed in the conditions of approval. The board approves it. One is the regulations require a 35-foot right-of-way, I think an easement. I didn't see that actually depicted on here. I saw the 18-foot wide pavement, but not the actual easement or right-of-way. And I think that needs to be depicted on there with the driveway, 18-foot driveway being centered on that. I think that's reasonable.
I believe, I'm sorry to interrupt, I believe that was provided in the heritage plan, and it has been, so I can make that superimposed on this plan as well.
They show 40 foot.
Is that line? There seems like there's an easement line.
No.
See that right there?
I thought that too.
That could be.
It needs to be at least a 35-foot right-of-way easement. I would say easement identified on there.
Yep.
It also calls for the common driveway to intersect no less than an 80-degree angle at the public way. And I'm sure it does. It looks like it does, but I think the angle of intersection needs to be shown on the plan. The narrative refers to underground utilities being provided. I didn't see where underground utilities are shown on the plan.
They are proposed to be underground, and I believe
You see those, Paul?
so we can make sure that those are shown as well.
And as I mentioned to Rob for the meeting, in terms of the agreement, I think needs to have a very clear statement that none of the parties shall ever request the town accept for maintenance, or in any way this become town way. Additionally, there's a provision here that allows the parties to the agreement, which is not the town, to amend any part of this agreement. Well, I think any amendment should be subject to concurrence by the planning board to ensure that Rob and I don't buy the two houses, get together and decide we're going to do away with that provision that says the town, it can't become town way, and then ask to become town maintain the roadway. I think there needs to be some town entity that has some concurrent authority over those changes.
Is that all you have?
That's all I have.
Paul, anything?
I don't really have anything to add.
Well, we've got time, but Mark, did you have anything to add? Questions?
Yeah, on the agreement there, it mentions that the party shall be responsible for maintenance of the common driveway and the drainage stormwater management system. And there is no easement shown or specified for the limits of the common driveway. And also, I'm curious about the agreement also specifically says that it does not allow any trespass of parcels other than on the common driveway. And as far as maintenance of the stormwater system, being a fact that it's responsibility of both property owners, and I'm also curious if it's responsibility of 3 property owners rather than 2. Do they all have a right of access to the stormwater rain garden, and should that rain garden be within an easement that's accessible to all parties involved in the common driveway? And specifically states that the stormwater system is for the benefit of all parties or all properties.
You must have done this before.
Pardon?
I'm just kidding. So great questions. So the first answer is if they're jointly and severally responsible for the maintenance, then yes, they should absolutely be granted an easement in favor of all 3 landowners. I believe that's the agreement. So we could, when we're redefining the easement, or further defining the easement for the access, we should incorporate, as suggested, an easement, and the attorneys can write up that would be all the access. So, for example, if Berkshire Arc's not doing what they're supposed to do with the stormwater basin, that either one of the other owners or another. Maybe even, I don't know if we want to include the town in that, but at least the other owners have the ability to go in and maintain that based on some sort of action.
I think what we heard from Mr. Higgins is joint and several liability rather than the permissive act of going in to rectify, that one and each and all are responsible, joint and several.
Yep, that would make a lot of sense. And then obviously updating the easement so that they have access to, perform.
Well, I've done past on subdivisions, we worked at before, when there is a drainage element on a particular lot, we always wrote up where the owner of that lot was primarily responsible, but all the entities within the development had responsibility with an easement. So it'd be written up so that lot 3 owner be responsible for everything on that lot. If they fail to do so, all three lot owners collectively have authority to access it and correct it.
Yeah, so just to clarify, I believe Berkshire Arc will be taking the responsibility of the stormwater basin, but obviously with the other owners being responsible if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, again, the goal is to protect town.
Yes.
Any liability between the parties,
Yep.
whatever passes.
All right, just so I understand, Rob, because I'm not an engineer, I look at these as best I can. I've learned a lot over the years, but I still don't. My eyes cross sometimes. But we've got two lots proposed for this common driveway and not three, correct?
So to clarify, the common driveway will accommodate 3 in the future is what I'm assuming and anticipating.
They accommodate up to 4, but you're going to be having 3 for future development?
Yes, sir.
Correct?
That's the understanding.
But you're only showing 2 butt-outs right now, correct?
That's correct. So is it a stormwater question? It's a stormwater question?
No, it's just that, is it because the other lots haven't been subdivided on an A&R? Is that why
They're already subdivided, so the lots exist, but there's no specific plans by either of the owners, which is one, the original owner to the left, and then the one in back, which is a fairly new owner. There's no immediate plans that we've been provided for the construction of single-family homes. At that time, what would be logical is that at the terminus of the driveway as shown, which is arguably at the high point of the lot before it drops down again, that's a good breaking off point, so to speak, where the rest of the driveway would be the responsibility of the future residents of the middle lot or the southerly lot. And then as somebody develops to the west, they can tie in generally as shown, but that is also at a high point, and arguably the driveway that we're showing has been taken into consideration in the stormwater basin to the break, basically to the topographic break in the lot. So everything else is going to a different area generally.
So I'll ask you, Richard, in the future then, when they want to develop that third lot that doesn't have a driveway yet, are they going to have to come back here, or is this approval going to be contingent upon, the length of the driveway or anything like that?
I would suggest that one of the conditions of the approval of this is that any extension of the driveway, either onto lot 2 or 1, would require that they come back to planning board for modification of the plan, approval of that. Because, very frankly, when you look at this, adding the driveway onto this lot or this lot won't affect how it intersects the street.
No.
You're taking consideration already that it's 3 lots. So the only real issue is the technical aspects of how the plan actually achieves that. And I don't see it. I think you can do it through a condition of the special permit. They have come back for modification of the plan.
Wouldn't that be more of a stormwater trigger?
Exactly.
That's where.
It could.
So you're coming back for lot 2 or 3 in this case, and lot 2 to the south, regardless. So you need a building permit for those.
Just a point of clarification, Richard. You said when they extend it to the third lot, it is already, the entire driveway is already on, I'll say, the third.
It is on that, but.
So it's not an extension to the third lot.
Extension for the purpose of building a house.
On lot 3. Just to be careful how we mince our words when we talk about it. It's an extension of the existing driveway.
I don't know where they're going to build a house on it. That's going to be an interesting challenge.
So I guess by definition, at the terminus of our driveway, on the south side, right? That's where the common driveway arguably ends. So as to your point, as you head south, that would be a single driveway. Maintenance purposes, everything else would be, the responsibility of that owner. So it's a little tricky, but I think everyone's thinking about it the right way.
The one aspect of it is when you overlay or put an easement on here,
Yep.
if that easement is at the end of this driveway,
Right, so
then clearly any extension is outside of the scope of the common driveway because you're limiting.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good point. So I think my logical thought was, and, please chime in, but my thought was that
Here.
the common drive easement should
So this is, these were just wood.
And on the adjacent Lot 3,
This is my trick driveway.
coming in over here.
That's how Rob wakes people up there.
This driveway, the common driveway comes in like this. And he has a spur that comes over from this one. And he has a spur. This is where the post future is. This is the one that he's showing right now. And then I say, this is actually the
sliding.
So this
Sliding
portion
shut
will be
is
common
what
because
they're
three
doing.
people would be using this from this point out. Only one person.
You tell them what cheese are eating.
I didn't say it.
Rob, for clarification, no,
Yeah.
that branch or that spur that goes off the driveway, that's not going to be constructed until that other lot is
That is correct.
constructed.
Right. And at that point, it's likely that they would be subject to your stormwater bylaw, as well as Lot 3.
And if it was me drawing the easement, I'd come up with 35, 40, whatever here, and then have that easement extend directly to both lots,
Yep.
so that their driveway portion is within that easement.
Will be here.
So essentially, if I'm correct in understanding,
Not extend
maybe it was something
a foot beyond the end.
Like a T.
Yes.
But this one will be common, just like this is not common.
That's right, so the
Actually, I
easement
think
would,
it's actually, yeah, it is on here. I believe that's what's already been created, it's just hard to see.
It's not labeled.
On the top of it. Here, dash lines, and then what we would do is just make sure, further define it.
It's not labeled for sure.
Further define and clarify for you. But
The only thing that needs to be 35 feet is the main access, the shared part. So so the spur off to Lot 1 does not have to be 35 feet. 'Cause that's a
Yeah.
single use.
But I would probably, just for the purposes of making sure things get handled properly, we can just have them include that area.
Well, and my suggestion for 35 is it then gives the owner of Lot 1 some flexibility of how to design it in there, because it may not be a direct
Agreed.
driveway.
So that's not going to extend all the way to the outer limits of Lot 3, correct?
Correct. I would stop it here, if that seems logical to the board, that would be my recommendation. Maybe 10 feet or 20 feet beyond where the common drive ends.
Any other questions? Mark, Stephen, Dan? Any other further questions?
yeah, further on the stormwater permit and,
We got to address that in a minute. We got to do the common driveway first. The two separate applications. So we're gonna approve the common driveway.
I thought the stormwater permit was entirely in front of the Concom. Is there?
No, that's our purview. Yeah.
Just then to clarify, is there a notice of intent that we're waiting on before we?
Nothing, sometimes I get confused about conservation when they ask when we have a meeting and whatever, and from what I understand from my days years ago, what we have as criteria to approve on our board is not contingent upon how they decide things, nor is it vice versa.
Except when there's fundamental issues of guidance and shaping the project so that it will be approvable. I understand.
I mean, they have a different set of criteria for their...
Easthampton bundles it with the Concom, Southampton puts it with the planning board. Let's proceed.
If it's helpful through the chair, we have communicated with the Conservation Commission. They I believe are ready to write an order subject to making sure that there's no layout changes based on the common drive review. So if we get the common drive review, my understanding is that would be, their approval would be subsequent. They actually...
Resource area is the waterfront?
Not necessarily. So to clarify, so there's riverfront area associated with this perennial stream across the street, but there are also other resource areas to the south, and also to the, I'm going to call it to the east. And the extent of resource areas on the west, I'm not sure, but not within a jurisdictional vicinity of our project. So there's some BVW around the south and east sides, and then there's riverfront area along the roadway.
And you get into that with building permit for the new house?
I'm sorry.
Do you get into that with the driveway or not until the building?
So the building permit, so the notice of intent has been filed and includes all of the resource areas within a jurisdictional vicinity of the proposed home. So it will include, that'll all be included in the order, and protection of those resource areas will all be, in how we met the performance standards is all incorporated.
That's what I was picking up on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A specific question about the drainage. The rain garden, I haven't had to really look at the calculation, but I assume that the pre and post is equivalent. But I'm a little concerned at the fact that you have a significant portion of the entire parcel draining to the rain garden with a single point of discharge, which essentially takes this entire flow, which is...
That's stormwater, right?
Yes.
Okay, we have to act on the common driveway.
Okay, we're still in the...
Yeah, we're still in common driveway.
And let me, upon, my view is that if you don't approve the special permit for common driveway, there's no sense in discussing stormwater, because it becomes a
There's two
moot point.
applications, so we have to vote on one and then go to the other. Question just on the current bylaw. Where are the mailboxes? Now, our current bylaw says that they should be in a pull-off within the right-of-way, but I've seen some others in town that are right on the street, but is there, because the
I think we'll make sure, I think they would need to adhere to the postmaster and the planning board's requirements for that. I haven't had those discussions, but we'll...
They're not shown on the plan, but, and the other thing, you're probably going to be requiring street numbers too, correct?
I would assume, yes. Yeah.
And from my experiences with the post office, not in Southampton, but another place, that it didn't matter what the town wanted, the postmaster decides where he wants mailboxes.
You probably want to be on the street like the other common driveways we have in town.
Normally they do.
Yeah.
Increasingly, the post office wants all the mailboxes in common location near the roadway, because it's cheaper for them to deliver the mail.
Do we have anything else that we need to address before we close the public hearing on the, actually, public? Does anyone here from the abutters or public have any questions about this proposal?
The thing that I've got is the water.
Just, okay, for stormwater, okay. All right.
Situation. I need to know what's going to happen with all this water.
We'll deal with that very shortly.
Was the public hearing notice two separate notices or one notice?
It was a combined notice.
And then keep the hearing open until, but then just discuss the stormwater before you close it, though.
And you don't want me to vote on the common driveway and the stormwater together, or separate?
You can vote on the common driveway in the public hearing, but don't close the hearing yet.
Okay. All right, so are we good with questions here before we continue on? All right, then I will call for a motion to accept the common driveway application. Let me get the applicant here. From Berkshire County ARC, as presented with conditions, as we discussed, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Richard, conditions, you want to explain them? I had easement on the 35-foot right-of-way.
Yeah, what I would say is that prior to obtaining or submitting for building permit, they submit a file plan for review by either planning board or planning consultant or whoever you want to, that demonstrates that complies with the 35-foot easement requirement in the zoning bylaw, the angle of intersection as specified in the zoning bylaw, and the location of underground utilities as required in the zoning bylaw. And a revised agreement that states that no party to seek town maintenance or acceptance of the common drive as a public way, easement access for stormwater maintenance shall be granted to all the parties to the agreement, and prior to any modification of the agreement, they seek concurrence by the planning board.
I almost typed all that.
Anything else?
Is it implicit, or are we going to make explicit that this common driveway serves no more than 3 dwellings, separate from the issue of 3 lots?
Well, according to bylaw, it can serve up to 4, but they're only proposing 3 right now, or whatever.
So we're acting on their proposal.
Right.
Well, I would interpret that as you would incorporate the plans that they've submitted that depict 3 lots being served by it, and any modification that would require them to come back with a new plan, so.
Thank you.
Good. All right, do I have a motion? On the common driveway.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the common driveway at, you have an address for this?
120 East.
It is 120 East?
120 East Street.
120 East Street,
Map 29
map 29,
Lot 50.
parcel 55B.
and 55B, right?
And just for clarification for the board, I believe we have listed 2 addresses, 118 and 120. I'm not sure if this property would be provided as an alternate address. So I think referring to it with the parcel number and the address is probably helpful.
Map 29, Lot 55 and 55B, correct? And you want 118 and 120?
I think that would cover it. I'm not sure what it's going to end up being assigned.
Well, I think you include 116, 118, 120 as shown in the plans, that'd be sufficient.
Great, thank you.
And I say that because otherwise you come back for a new special permit for 116.
Right, true.
For addresses 116, 118, 120 East Street, identified as map 29, parcel 55-B.
And 55B, right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Paul, seconded by Mark. Any other further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous?
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll continue on with the same project for a stormwater permit for the same address, so
Yes, sir.
continue.
Thank you. Again, for the record, Rob Levesque, Berkshire Arc. So the same project, as Mr. Darnold mentioned, we have a stormwater basin located at the front of the property. We're essentially handling our stormwater in this basin. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. We do have a stormwater report that is a supplemental submission over the original. And I think there was a question about the pre and post. I have the 2, 10, and 100-year storms. There's a slight reduction from the pre to the post at both of our design points. One is from 3.9 CFS to 3.2, and then design point 2 is from 2.3 to 1.9. again, we have to meet the 10 standards because we're within conservation jurisdiction. Your bylaw also refers to the DEP stormwater management standards that were revised in 2008 and are still active. So meeting those 10 standards is a requirement, which we have in our stormwater report. But other than that, I think it's fairly straightforward. Probably be better to answer questions than get too long-winded.
For the public's sake, maybe show them where the runoff is going from which lots and where to into the retention area and...
Yes, sir. So we have figures in our stormwater report. Let's see what section this is. And I'll show the...
I'm not quite sure the figures will make sense to the Mark, but if you show them...
They're pretty descriptive, but...
On the map, topographically, where the sheet flow is going.
Sure. So, not to bore everybody with the figures, but essentially what happened is, as you're aware, as you come up, so this is East Street here, as you come up the proposed driveway, there's a high point right in about here. So we have a topographic break that sends water pre-development in this general direction, and as well towards the wetland in the crotch or depression here, and then it continues up the slope. So there's two design points. One is down here, two is back here at this bordering vegetated wetland. When we analyze that, we look at the amount of water flowing pre-development, and we have to make sure that we're either not increasing it or matching it. We have a subtle decrease in the amount of water based on our model and keep the program habitat. This water in the front is being collected in a swale along the driveway, as well as another low area on the other side. There's these, we call it a shoulder, the lighter color that you see is a shoulder that the water will be picked up. And there's area drains that pick that water up, convey it to a flared end section. That flared end section goes into a sediment forebay with a rip-wrap check dam, so to speak. And we have what do you call it, infiltration trench here to allow the basin to function during frozen ground conditions. So for the purposes of there's some engineers, so I don't need to explain it to them, so I apologize. But if you think of our stormwater like an hourglass, so during a rain event, because we have new impervious surfaces, all that water that comes from the impervious surface that runs off quicker adds to the peak discharge rates. So there's more water coming during storm events, and we analyze the storm events, including up to the 100-year storm, which in this case is 6.4 inches of rain in an 8.4-hour period, so a significant amount of rain. We're required to cause downstream flooding, one of the standards. So what happens is that stormwater is basically flowing down, being collected in that hourglass that I talked about is our stormwater basin. And it will hold the water, and it will allow that water to infiltrate. And if it needs to, it will infiltrate at a certain rate based on soil type. Soil gravity, checks for soils based on all rates. Those rates are utilized to determine the infiltration. So that basin gets sized based on those infiltration rates. We will infiltrate into the ground, and then as necessary, in the event of a catastrophic storm event, we have an emergency overflow where the water can fail safely towards the street. At that point, 6.5 inches of rain, we're probably, some of you are going to be close to where your houses are, but realistically, that's a very significant rainfall event. So that's the general gist of what is proposed. Again, there's a slight reduction of what's already coming off the site pre-development versus what we're proposing in the post-development condition.
You have, since you're interested, you want to ask him a question and identify yourself and your address?
Debbie Trudeau, I live across the street from this lot.
Okay.
So I've dealt with a lot of water since I moved into that house. Yes.
Okay.
Nothing's been done to help me. in my property that I pay taxes for. So it's becoming like wetlands, and I'm paying for it. But if we can come up with a solution to help with my water on my side of the street. So on your side of the street, you're talking about putting in a drain, if I'm understanding it, to collect the water.
It's an earthen depression.
It's a big basin.
Yeah, it'll be
And it goes
grass.
into the ground, and then...
It's a subtle, sorry, through the chair. It's a subtle depression at the front of the lot. It'll look like a grassed depression with a few controls for that.
That might help you on your side.
Correct.
What's helping me on my side?
I
That I
cannot, I don't,
complaining about for years.
that would be,
How does that help me?
The only question we have, which is every now and again, Mr. Trudeau, is that existing conditions that the town hasn't addressed can't be a part of this project because they're controlling the water on their side from what they're going to do. What existing conditions are is something that they aren't responsible for unless they add to it. And what they're proposing to do with the stormwater management system is to contain everything on their side so it's not going to affect the other side of the road.
No, and
So,
it
but-
usually doesn't affect my side of the street. It's a lot comes down from Batista's apple orchard, and it comes down from the other side.
But I mean, that's an existing problem that that property owner and the applicant are not responsible for.
No, I understand that they're not, but it's funny how, like, now this project's gonna happen, and they're gonna make sure that their water situation doesn't get bad. Because it's going to be what, considered a business there in the house?
No, it's a group home for,
So is that not considered a business?
No.
People that are going to be employees there to help?
it's just, they're going to be 4, maybe 6 children there with some staff. But I mean,
So-
you can call it a business, but it's not
And under Mass General Law, it's treated as a single-family home.
single.
Thank you.
Yeah. They're allowed by right.
Not a use
You know.
issue.
Go ahead, Rob.
I think I'm
All right.
prepared to answer any other questions.
We're going to address some.
Yeah, one question I have is the outlet for the rain garden is towards the east. And currently, from what I see, the sheet flow is pretty much straight for across, heading towards the road. And as we get this rain garden, we're concentrating all the water from the driveway and also larger from the developed portion of the site into this rain garden. And it has a emergency overflow, which is a primary outlet. And it seems that it's changing it from a sheet flow going to the road to a more of a point source discharge on the easterly side of the road. It doesn't seem significant, but I'm not living there, but in a 100-year storm, you've got almost 3 CFS and 5,000 cubic feet of water leaving at that specific point heading easterly. As currently, it is distributed throughout. I think your pre and post for the site appear to be very good, but I'm really concerned about concentrating the entire drainage area to that one emergency overflow area from the rain garden.
So, again, pretty, logical comment. Yeah, I think there's a few hundred feet of frontage, arguably, that it currently flows to pre-development, like you said. In the past, when we're channelizing flow, or I don't want to say channelizing, but when we're creating more of a point flow, we've utilized level spreaders. So that's an option. There are probably other ways to disperse the water along the frontage. And or if there's, if it made sense to some sort of armoring to prevent scour. I think there's a number of options that could be looked at.
What would you suggest on that, Mark?
Not want to be laboring the project here, but maybe look at the, get my direction right, but the northeast corner of the parcel, and what happens at that location. It's nice to see you're just spreading it out over this little area, but we're concerned about, you had the entire, everything going towards the road. Sort of the gunshot towards that.
When this gets
corner
filled
that
with water, it might just spill over this way.
So you're concerned about in excess of the 100-year storm, essentially?
I just looked at the calculation.
Yeah.
It's basically this point source at this elevation.
Yep. Okay. Understood. Yep.
The total feet of post is good.
You don't want the road to wash away.
You don't want the road to wash away. You don't want your
Fair
neighbors
enough.
concerned about a new gully in their front driveway.
Understood. Okay.
There was no, I was asking Mark this, there's no culvert under the road there that feeds into that stream across the street?
Not that I'm aware of along that portion of the frontage. There's a culvert, I believe there's a culvert to the east, sorry. Because there's a wetland that runs along the side of the field. And it's not shown on our plan, I believe there's a culvert that conveys water from this wetland to the branch.
Is that over where you live, Mr. Trudeau? Where he's pointing to?
Coming from this end, going where all the little blue.
No, you can go up to the map and point it out if you want, so it's where you're speaking about, if you want to point it out.
That's the stream.
Excuse us. Your house is to here.
Okay.
This is the top of the hill toward your house.
Where it's coming from, there's a friggin' culvert.
Yeah, well, there's a water, there's a stream right there. Oh. I think she's talking about it's out there. There's a flood zone, it's across the street. It's supposed to, that's what it's doing, it's defined as a flood area.
Comes down and there's a big pipe on this road, but nothing comes out because that's been blocked.
So that's the flood area. She lives in a flood zone, so it's not like it's outside of their site.
Could I just clarify one item through the chair? I think you had mentioned the term outlet control structure. I don't believe there's an outlet control structure. It's an emergency overflow. That's what we're talking about? Okay. Typically, and I'm not sure why we're not showing armoring. Maybe it's not on this particular sheet, but we could armor that slope with 4 to 6 inch angular stone, riprap type of material. I believe that would prevent scour and allow the water to, again. So right now it's it's a good point. Right now the water's sheet flowing like my pen to the street, so it would be more concentrated here. We could prevent scour. I don't know why we're not showing it. We can show the riprap, based on there's calculations for the extent of riprap that our engineers could provide. It's a pretty flat area here, so I wouldn't expect major scour. There's a subtle swale that then leads it into the existing wetland and our delineating stream within there. I don't know if that takes care of the concern, but we could certainly add that if it were a condition.
Rob, can you talk about the depths of the water in the basin during various flows?
It's in here. I can tell you right off the bat what the contours are. So the bottom of the buffer zone. The overflow is 226. So it's basically a foot. So it's not a very deep space.
Right, so you don't have a whole lot of, right, so there's not a whole lot of volume.
Yeah, and it's designed to infiltrate to the 100-year storm. So really, unless, assuming it functions as designed, it appears that, up into including a 6.4-inch rainfall event, that shouldn't be, that overflow, I wouldn't believe it would be activated.
Is it a broader spreader than a riprap?
Yeah.
Just look at the finished contours. They've got a little berm here and
Yeah,
here.
this is a flat area here.
Right. And pull that back and do a broader spreader.
I guess I'm not so much worried about this. It's not a huge flow. It's more the fact that this entire volume of water was doing this, and now you got the volume of water. I'm not worried too much about this. This is nice and flat. Is that now you have it all here?
Even if the soils are
All right,
not great.
given what Rob has proposed, do you want to add to that, or do you agree with his?
Well, I guess I do, I think that's a normal design. You want to make sure that the embankment is protected and the erosion slows down there, whether it's a little lip spreader up there or whatever. But again, I'm not so much worried because you are discharging to a relatively flat slope there. It's not really steep.
Yeah.
I guess I'm more concerned about the volume of water that ultimately winds up in the swale next door when it wasn't moving up in that swale next door previously. It was going across the street. And now you have more volume of water at that.
I think, and
So based on the contours, if it was running off the front, so let's say it was running off in the same kind of disturbance area. If you look at the 222 contour, it looks like that pulls off into the wetland as it gets down to this point. So I think we're matching the design point pretty well. It's fairly flat. I mean, it looks like it's kind of a scale. Just to give you a slope here. One scale.
1%.
Inch. Probably, maybe 6 to 8% in there. Rough and tough, 1 in 12. 3%, something like that, here, and then here. I'll say that's an inch. Pretty technical here. So, yeah, probably 3-4% in here before it gets into the swale. So,
I'm not worried about the velocity or the scour. It's just a change in water quantity that's occurring across the neighbor's front yard.
Richard, do you have anything? Ian? Stephen?
So, just to go over this, does it benefit the pond if the outlet is slightly higher than what you show here based on the 100-year storm outfall elevation, which is identified here with its storage capacity of 3,100 cubic feet. And then there's a peak value in one of your calculation sheets on 21 that has it slightly higher as a peak elevation, basically a quarter of a foot higher.
so the peak elevation is the perimeter elevation, but the but the emergency overflow is at 226.
So our contour around the basin is 227.
Right.
So in the event, and to Mr. Darnell's point, in the event of a storm event exceeding 6.4 inches of rain, we would expect that this overflow would be activated. Up into and including that event, I believe that's accommodated through the exfiltration to the bottom of the basin.
So that's triggered through the 100-year storm outflow.
Correct. So technically, under the red, we're supposed to design to the
100-year storm and not cause a problem. So that's not an active outlet, I don't believe, an active outlet up to and including the 100-year storm.
Just asking the question.
Yep.
Any other questions from the general public? Any other questions from the board?
None here.
Richard, you all set?
I'll set with this, yes.
Okay, then, given that, I will ask for a motion to accept the stormwater permit application, again, presented by Berkshire ARC for the 116, 118, 120 East Street.
I would not include 116, because you don't want to give the impression that you're getting a stormwater permit for that lot.
So 118?
I would do it just for 120.
120?
And the common driveway to the extent that's shown on the plan.
That's right.
The stormwater permit for 120 East Street and including the common driveway, correct?
As shown on the plan.
As shown on the plan.
And Rob mentioned adding riprap in there.
Yes, sir.
With conditions, and they are again, what? Riprap and what else, Mark?
I think that's rip-wrapping and armoring of the emergency spillway.
Armoring. Riprap and armoring of the emergency spillway. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the stormwater permit for said address of 118.
120
I'm sorry, 120
East.
East Street with the shared use driveway as shown on the plans.
Do I have a second?
I'll say.
Flip a coin.
Stephen Harris. Suspect.
Stephen? Second by Stephen.
Stephen Harris.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
One question I had is, are you requiring a performance guarantee on either the special permit or the stormwater?
I saw that in the common driveway. I don't know what your purview on that.
I know if it was subdivision, you would. The question is, how important do you feel it's necessary that the common driveway be built to the specifications? They're going to do it probably, but I mean, it's in your bylaw. I'm not sure if you've ever required one on the common driveway or not.
I don't think we have in the past based on the one on Gilbert. We didn't do that on Gilbert.
If you haven't done in the past, I wouldn't do it here. I would suggest one slight modification to the special permit conditions. I knew I had something. Include in there that they submit a typical cross-section of the common driveway, demonstrating that conforms to the standards.
Sure.
Got that, Rob?
Yes, sir.
Any other further discussion?
Just to follow up on Richard's statement regarding the cross-section, I believe it's stipulate they needed to follow the town standards unless they request a variance to utilize a
And they didn't make any requests, so.
right, so unless they make a formal request, I assume they have to go as far as pavement depth and
The
gravel.
request would need to be made as part of the special permit application.
Yeah, and the plan is to adhere to the town standards.
Okay.
Yep.
What about, do we have anything for during the construction phase of this project?
I'm sorry, Dan?
Anything about during the construction phase? Requiring anything? Protect the roadway, specifically any debris entering the roadway during that time?
That would all be up to the highway department, but usually you put in tracking pads and all this other stuff.
We do that. We do have that proposed. We have erosion controls as well as an anti-tracking pad at the entrance.
I apologize, I just can't see it, so.
Oh, no, it's okay.
It's
And
cool.
yeah, so
Well, they have a silt fence here.
yeah.
Good.
Okay? Okay, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Sorry for the continuation, but
No worries at all. A night off is always welcome.
that's what happens when we have these well-paid salaried boards, you know, we... We'll get you that decision probably in a week or so after it's drafted.
Yeah, try better next time.
And now,
Did you-
now I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing. I forgot to do that. Motion to close the public hearing on both the special permit and the stormwater.
Did you have on the
So
agenda
moved.
to discuss next meeting? I think on your agenda, you had published, you were going to discuss a little bit about next meeting.
I need a motion to close this public
this here?
hearing, yes.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on the special permit and the stormwater.
Motion's made by Dan, do I have a second?
I second it.
Motion made by Dan, seconded by Mark. All in favor? Aye.
And I can just clarify one reason I want these done two separately is special permit has a 20-day appeal period. Stormwater doesn't. You don't appeal stormwater the way you do special permits, so it's best to have two separate votes, two separate decisions.
Motion to close the stormwater hearing.
Thank you.
Motion to close the stormwater hearing.
Been made and seconded.
Oh, no, that was for the common driveway.
I move that we close the stormwater hearing.
Second?
Motion made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and we got them both closed. Okay, I have no other business other than the fact that the Parsons Village, which some of you might be familiar with from a previous subdivision roadway that was approved a couple months ago.
Want to move that ahead of committee reports?
I'm going to take it out of order right now. But it's a pre-planning discussion. We can't naturally have all the members there because it would be unlawful. But all the town departments have been notified. Mark, myself, and Richard will attend that discussion, and all they're looking for is direction on ways they can approach developing that site. So all the town departments, plus the planning, will be there Tuesday, September 5th at 10 to just go over their ideas. And they're looking for direction.
Now, that would preclude either Dan or I from attending as select board members.
I would assume so,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
If you have a quorum of the planning board, it has to be posted in public meeting.
Understood.
If you're really interested, I would bow out, and if you would rather be there to listen and do you and
You've
Mark.
got the history, but I want to note the dynamic, given the two of us serve on two boards.
I had no intention of being there.
Well, that's cool, but I mean, that's what we'll see with site visits going forward.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So if you'd like to, Stephen, I'll step aside and.
Can you briefly say how much has evolved? Are they just back at the chalkboard trying to figure out? Because we did the subdivision approval, A&R.
But there was no,
You'll be
if
at
you
the
recall,
September
it
meeting.
was denied by the zoning board of appeals, originally a special permit, which falls under their purview, under existing zoning. They may come back with that same proposal when the bylaws are approved by the Attorney General's office, that were approved at town meeting. They're waiting to see if the bylaws have been approved, because then it will fall under the planning board purview, and they will come before us. So they're still trying to figure out,
And they're trying to figure out how they can do the affordable housing component.
Right.
I know they threw out some ideas, and I kind of said no on a couple of them, because you can't separate out the affordable housing from the rest of the development. It's got to be integrated into it, and so they're trying to figure out how to make it work.
Yep, okay.
And they may come back with a more conventional development or not.
Is it definitive enough in the inclusionary bylaw that states where it has to be integrated?
Well,
I mean, and the only reason I say that, Richard, I says from my perspective, I would settle for something rather than nothing.
But the bylaw is clear that it has to be, base has to go on the subsidized housing inventory list. So it's got to be approved by the state as well. And the state standards are pretty clear that you can't segregate out the affordable housing from another component. Therefore, if it were to be approved, if they did propose something like that, my inclination would be, one of the conditions is they go through the state approval process for an alternative design. Because otherwise, what you may have is affordable housing that doesn't satisfy the state requirements and therefore doesn't help you in your affordable housing objective.
Gotcha.
And that is contrary to the town's bylaw.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what comes about. So would you like to attend in my absence?
The date again is?
September 5th.
At 10 a.m.
Oh, that's coming right up.
Yeah. 10 a.m.?
I'd love to kick the tires on it, yes.
So Stephen and Mark will be there with me.
And I'll tell you, every developer that tries to do this type of development has the same challenge they do.
Yeah.
Because essentially what they have to do is an internal subsidy of the affordable housing through the non-affordable units, and there's only so much you can transfer and make it feasible. And that's the challenge they're having. Every developer has it, that tries to do this type of project has it. Usually affordable housing is viable when you're getting an external subsidy such as tax credits or some type of financing benefits such as a community development block grant or a CPA or something of that nature.
Okay, you've got that on your calendar?
Thank you.
All right. Committee reports, anything from Dan or Mark or Stephen?
I sent an email out about 2 hours before this meeting. The Select Board met last night and deferred action on notice of withdrawal from Chapter 61 for the properties on College Highway.
Was that the O'Connor land?
Yeah, yeah. The reason being that this board wanted to hear from the Open Space Committee, and they are not statutorily noticed, but they are the ones with long-term vision for implementing the open space and recreation plan. So the board decided to wait for the Open Space Committee to meet, and review that, and come up with a recommendation, and that puts it before the Select Board on the September 26th agenda. We don't want to prejudice the perspective of the Open Space Committee, but we acknowledge that all the other committees have advised that the Select Board, which has the authority, waive the right of first refusal. And that may very well be the outcome. What this has triggered, though, is a discussion about how to have a more predictable, open, inclusive process of communication that begins promptly upon the beginning of the clock, which is when the notice is mailed. So, okay, as soon as you've got it in your hands, 120 days clock has already begun to run.
So what you're saying is they weren't notified about this transaction?
They're not required to
I
be
don't
notified.
understand your question.
They weren't notified, the open
Who's they?
space?
Open Space Committee did not have a notice and a request to,
They're not required in state law to be notified.
but they're not required under state law.
Yeah, the state law requires planning board, conservation, assessors, and select board. I believe those are 4 boards that are required.
Right. The notice is not proper and complete if the applicant doesn't provide notice to all of those boards. How the town then completes its review is up to the town policies and procedures. What I emailed you to not kill more trees is a hyperlink to a process that's used by a town about our size and without our complexion of chapter lands. It's the town of Stowe, Massachusetts. And they have subsequently put their policy to extremely good use. So recognizing that the state law provides landowners who keep their land open, eligible for these preferential tax programs, do get a tax reduction, and that burden is spread across the other taxpayers of the town in consideration of public benefit of keeping land in agriculture, forestry, or generally open under 61B. So, you know about the taxes that may be collected at the back end, but under the conditions that the property is coming out for conversion, then the town has a right of first refusal, and how it executes that review is quite variable across communities. I've worked my entire professional life in land conservation and have appeared before more than 20 communities dealing with Chapter 61 withdrawal issues. And it truly runs the gamut. I think a policy that would ensure timely and broad communication anytime the town gets a notice is important. Chairwoman Falls asked me to draft something up. Just wanted to give you a heads up that my reference would be the policy that Stowe adopted 10 years ago or so.
The big problem is the way the statute's written. They notify those 4 boards directly as opposed to notifying one entity that then has responsibility for coordinating it. And the state law encourages a fragmentation of decision-making as opposed to a unified decision-making.
That's a fact, yeah. Looks like there's some concerns, or I may not have been clear about what the proposal is. This is not meant to prejudice the notice in front of us, just that there's an important board that the select board felt should be considered.
How do they get around the law to do that then?
I'm sorry?
I'm asking Richard, how do they get around the law to do that?
Oh, it's not around the law, it's supplemental to
You comply with the law, but you just create an internal process that ensures that everybody responds to one entity and speak with a single voice. Because ultimately, yes, a conservation commission or planning board could say, look, we want to exercise the right, but unless the select board puts it onto the town meeting warrant to appropriate the funds, you can't execute that.
They could exercise and assign the right without a town meeting.
They could, yes.
And like Stowe, Southampton is fortunate to have very active land trusts, very capable land trusts. One of the considerations right now at this moment is this town and that land trust are extremely busy having, I think, been awarded, but certainly are in the competition for a major state grant to conserve a significant amount of land with willing landowners in the town of Southampton. So if we got all excited about the newest notice, we'd have to understand as a community, and ultimately the select board, what we were taking on in terms of financial obligations, either for the town or our very generous and capable partners. We shouldn't expect that they can answer every fire alarm. And because these often get contested and end up in court, part of this identifies a point at which town council would review the notice for its sufficiency.
The thing that I would hope would be implemented in this new way of looking at it. Now, that parcel that we're referring to, I think, was less than 4 acres, correct? I think it was like 3-point-something acres.
Two different things. I do not want to confuse the two.
No,
this
but
procedure would not be retroactive. Don't even let that word cross your mind.
No, but I'm saying if that has to go through a lot more scrutiny, whether there's got to be, the committee has got to put maybe a minimum on the number of acres that they're considering to preserve for open space, and I don't consider
that would be arbitrary.
A couple, 3 acres, unless there's a connection somewhere.
Read the draft, because I think it sets out the public purposes and the processes that ensure once you get the notice, everybody moves efficiently and quickly to assess this is not of interest and provide the landowner with a quick and complete answer, because there's a unified process that's invoked rather than waiting for 4 separately noticed meetings and a redo, which is inefficient. It's not good for the town. It's not good for the landowner. And we're not facing a crisis, but I think we're no better than, we can improve our grade in how we handle these notices.
Don't want to get in a situation like one town, I will not state the name, but they exercised a right of first refusal a number of years ago. The situation was the owner was going to sell it to a family member. That triggered 61A. The town that would remain unnamed, their school committee said, oh, we're looking at building a new school. That could be a good location for a new school. That town paid about $350,000 to acquire it. And then afterwards they found out, no, you couldn't build there because the wetlands would require you to build in this location, and the state building committee would not allow you to do that building project in conjunction with, let's say, contiguous to another school, because that'd be 2 separate buildings. And so that town ended up with a $350,000 piece of property that they could use for recreation purposes and put a nice trail through there, but that wasn't what it was acquired for.
Absolutely key, what you're raising. There was a missing piece of due diligence. And you could say, well, the A, B, C, or D board should have caught that.
Yeah.
But because there's not unified review, that can fall through the gaps. 21E hazards review, it's a normal real estate transaction in the end with all the standard due diligence, and it has to be looked at with clear eyes about where's the funding coming from, what are the performance standards, timely response, 120-day notice, plus a whole lot of other time clocks depending on how the process works out. And I think having it down on paper will make a lot of us rest easier.
How do you do unified with 4 boards? You have
You have a joint,
joint meetings?
yep, called within 5 days, as soon as you determine the notice is worth responding to. I've already seen notices that this town acted on that I would not have responded to, because they simply invoke the notion of residential development maybe for a family member. Family transfers are exempt under Chapter 1. It's the conversion, except one buys, for family members. So, if you don't have town council or someone who's experienced, and I'm not pointing at myself, I'm pointing at Richard, you can end up in a lot of hurt. Your aspirations are dashed and/or you've got a bad value. It's high-pressure stuff, and it's best that you have many eyes on it before you say no or pull the curtain. So I'm going to bring a draft after submitting it to Chris through the select board to each of the statutorily noticed committees in the hopes that everybody agrees that this will be an efficient and predictable process. And I'd love to hear your thoughts along the way.
Any other committee reports? Dan?
Nothing to add.
Mark?
No, not this time.
Polly? Okay. I have canceled since we met tonight, I canceled our meeting next Wednesday, which was a regular one. And with Richard's schedule, now he's doing, for those that weren't at the last meeting, he is doing some consulting until the end of November
Yes.
for another town who's got some planning issues. They happen to coincide with our meetings. However, tonight was a case in point. We needed him tonight for this project. If going forward, I don't get any special permit applications or stormwater, or we could probably, if a residential stormwater, we could probably get his comments on it and go from there. I will reschedule if necessary if I need his services. But I'll put that out in advance and let you know. So right now, our schedule will be meeting the third Wednesday in September as usual. But if I need to, for a special project, or I need his consulting and need his presence, I will have to cancel our regular scheduled meeting and then add one somewhere where he's available, because he's not available on the 1st and 3rd until December. Correct?
Correct. So can you give me a date that you're looking at, 1st and 3rd Wednesday?
Right now, we're 1st and 3rd Wednesdays.
And
unless we have a special project that comes up, an application where we need his consulting in person, I will change that schedule, but right now, we'll leave it as is. But I canceled next two Wednesdays because there's no need to meet this week and next week, because this was a special meeting.
I understand all of that. If I might, Mr. Chair, just give you notice that I will not be able to attend on the 20th.
20th? Okay. September 20, right?
September 20, I cannot attend.
Okay. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Made by Paul and seconded by Dan. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Have a good long weekend.
If I go in your library.
And as one...
I'm good.